It is the land of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, the birthplace of Jesus. From Genesis to Revelation, Israel is the centerpiece of God's story, a saga that continues to unfold in our daily news. But behind the headlines are the people caught in the crosshairs of some really complex issues. It can be hard to see clearly from the outside, so let's explore my homeland from within. In all the Middle East, Israel stands as a beacon of democracy. It's a place where unlikely neighbors find a way to thrive. Centuries-old traditions alongside groundbreaking innovation. Jerusalem and Tel Aviv, close but worlds apart. Today, we look at 3 stories about neighbors. Often, being a neighbor is complicated. Proximity isn't always easy. For the people who live here, the reminder is often in our own backyard.
Once you really begin to know the person on the other side and you understand their needs.
We will answer your questions.
And they see your humanity.
What is the ceremony?
It changes a lot. There was just a year and a month difference between David and Iran. In the case of all young men in Israel, they had to go to the army. And so they actually were both in the army at the same time. Most Israeli kids, they go away for a year to forget. It's very difficult, it's traumatic. When David came back, he was doing his master's in the philosophy of education. And then he got called to go to reserves. And he came to see me. He didn't want to serve in the occupied territories. He was the officer. If I don't go, what will happen to my soldiers? And if I do go, then I will treat people with dignity, and so will all my soldiers. You know, we don't really know who the person is behind the gun. He went to serve, and he was killed by a Palestinian sniper, along with 9 other people. When the soldiers came to tell me that David had been killed, one of the first things that I said is, you may not kill anybody in the name of my child. The minute that I recognized that a Palestinian mother who'd lost her son felt exactly the same as I did, there was no difference, the tears were the same, everything was the same, so why could it not be a powerful weapon for us to make change? I wanted to do something to prevent other families from experiencing this pain. We are 600 families who've all lost an immediate family member to the conflict. What we believe is that there must be, in any future political agreement, some framework for a reconciliation process, because up to now we've stood on the White House lawn, we've hugged each other and signed all kinds of political agreements, but there's never been an agreement between people. This is something that we have to have. One of the worst things that we experience in Israel and Palestine is that we don't know each other. This not knowing is what creates a fear. The fear creates hatred, and the hatred creates violence.
The organization gets criticism from both sides. One is that the organization is only supporting a Palestinian agenda. The other main criticism is that it's working with the occupier.
We run a project in the Parent Circle, a parallel narrative. We wanted to experience the narrative of the other, how we see our history. So we went to the Holocaust Museum. That's not for comparison of suffering, but that's to understand, because if you don't understand that part of the Jewish history, you will never understand the DNA of fear. Then we went to a Palestinian village which existed before 1948, and it's now Israel, and 2 of the families from our group came from there. And one of the mothers stood and she looked down and she found the well and she started to cry and she said, "This is where I drew water when I was a child." You begin to create an empathy for how the other sees their history. And if all our politicians would do that, can you imagine what a difference that would make? I started to travel all over the world and met extraordinary people and thought I was quite a big deal. It's very easy to go around the world talking about peace and reconciliation. And then I came home one night from the States and I had another knock on the door from the army, and they came to tell me that they caught the man who killed David. So here was a man in jail, and here I am talking about reconciliation, and am I willing to walk the talk? It took me about 3 months, and then I wrote a letter. I told them who David was and who I was, and that I was part of the parents' circle, and that we needed to meet. We owed that to our children and grandchildren. And I thought immediately, of course, the next day I'll get a letter from the sniper. Of course, that doesn't happen. There's no such thing as instant reconciliation. It's not coffee. It took about 3 years, and I got a very difficult letter back from the sniper to say that I'm mad and I should stay away from his family. But an extraordinary thing happened. Once I wrote that letter, it was as if I gave up being a victim. It's not that I don't still want to meet with him, I do. But I cannot be contingent on him being repentant. So it's being at peace with yourself and allowing yourself to be free, to move on. Coming here and sensing that there are so many Palestinians who have lost in the audience and so many Israelis, but yet we can sit together, and if we can, surely that should be an example for other people. The work that we do is to prepare people to understand the humanity of the other. We work in schools with kids. If you will go into an average classroom of 17-year-olds in Israel, and you'll say, who's ever met a Palestinian? It'll probably be nobody. And who speaks Arabic? Maybe one, because their grandmother came from Iraq. And who's been overseas? Probably 80% of the class. So for the first time in their lives, they actually meet a Palestinian physically in their classroom who tells the story of their path to reconciliation. They suddenly see the humanity in that other person. There has to be a way where people will feel their own dignity. I don't really know of another group in the world that does this kind of work during the conflict. I'd be very happy to have a permanent ceasefire, but if it came along with some form of reconciliation, I might be much more confident about the future of my grandchildren.
In Israel, helping a neighbor can be as simple as refusing to hurt them. Age-old conflicts are being challenged by a new wave of citizens set on peace. Israelis and Palestinians alike are reaching across political and cultural lines. Like modern-day Good Samaritans, they set aside their prejudices and risk their reputations to save lives. How far would you go to help your neighbor?
After 2,000 years of really rough Christian Jewish history, my dad felt like he wanted to do something. It wasn't something that just words were going to change. He needed to do something physically, come here with his hands, bring reparation to the relationship. The Levi family home and Yekev Har Bracha, which is the Mount of Blessing. Hey, Nir.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Howdy.
Yeah.
Okay. Only two of them have wine in, so you can really
This is where the grapes go after they're harvested. And then after they've been fermented in these, the big metal vats, then they're put into these oak barrels. So here's this Christian family with 11 children showing up in this Orthodox man's house saying, hey, we're here to help you. What do you need?
They were helping me during all the years. Zach did the whole concrete here in the floor and also in the barrel room. They built the whole stuff for me.
We were organic farmers in Tennessee for 6 years prior to that. So the initial connection happened with Nir. It's just farmer talk. All right, so head down there.
We'll talk about it a couple of minutes.
Yep. Dad began to ask Nir what his challenges were, if there was any place for us to come in and help. He said, well, to be honest, the hardest thing is when the harvest comes around. There are machines that can pick, but up here in the mountains, the machines have a little bit of a harder time, and it's just better for the plant to be hand-picked. I have 10 brothers and sisters, so we started coming as a family to help with the harvest, and we told our friends about it, and they told their friends about it, and pretty soon, 5 or 6 years later, all of a sudden we had 300 people show up. Our volunteers come in for the harvest around the 1st of September. The harvest usually goes till around the end of November, something like that. We definitely do get a lot of farmers. We call them dirt people, right? They're people of the land.
They're a big foundation now in helping all the farmers around. But we're the backbone.
This is where it started, right here.
The Levy family and the Waller family are like the first connection.
Our families have really connected over the last 10 years.
You shall plant vines in the hills of Samaria, and you shall drink the wines. Jeremiah, while he was seeing 10 tribes of Israel exiled, he already, by his faith, said and talked about it to ease the burden, telling them, you shall come back to the land of Israel. You shall plant vines. Where? In the hills of Samaria. Yes, exactly. These are the hills of Samaria. It's the heartland of Israel.
The road you guys came in on is Highway 60, and that's actually called the Road of the Patriarch. Yeshua would have walked up and down that road. This is actually a town of real Samaritans. There's actually a well just down the bottom called Jacob's Well. That's actually Jordan right there. Off that direction, you could see the Mediterranean. The stories we read about in the New Testament, the Samaritan woman at Jacob's Well, Abraham came in. He actually came over the mountains. God said, look around, this is the land that I'm going to give to you. And you're actually standing where it happened, like it all becomes real. It's like reading the Bible in 3D. We came in the first day we were here, we're like, hey, we are Christian. They saw that we were zealous to see the land restored. And they also see in Isaiah, it actually says, foreigners will come and be your plowmen and your vine dressers. When we showed up, they're like, hey, I mean, they even got them more excited. They're like, hey, there it is right there. Here these guys come. It was just a heart to bless and serve. And then we sort of found the prophecy once we got here. All these people that we're bringing in, these Christians from all over the world, we've had people from like 20 different countries that have actually come to participate. And when they touched it, when you see it with your eyes, touch it with your hands, there's like a really special like grounding that takes place. There's so many things that are pulling at our faith. To stand and actually read what you're looking at, to read about it in the Bible, what you're seeing here is it just builds your faith. We've had some resistance from other communities. There are people who very rightfully, think, bad things about us and what our real motive is in coming in here. So it's definitely been something we've had to work at to say, no, listen, we are not here for anything else except to bless and serve you guys, to love you, and to be a part of what God's doing in the restoration of Israel, and that's it.
For all these years, strengthening the farmers of Judah and Samaria, not as a religious act, but as a helpful task, a helpful deed of the Christians of the world and of America to give up a shoulder to their mates, to their friends, in the land of Israel.
The first couple years was just our family, and then it started like growing like crazy. We was like triple the amount of volunteers every year, and we're just trying to keep up with it. That's when we established Hayuvel as an organization, because we're like, hey, we got to get this organized.
It was a spiritual chavaya, how do you say, adventure or experience, and it's beautiful.
There's this restoration switch, and he's like, okay, it's on now. Nir Levy, move up to Har Bracha, the Mount of Blessing, and plant a vineyard. 4 years later, all of a sudden, God's like, okay, now we need to pull some people from the nations, okay, from the United States, from Canada, let's see, okay, start bringing these guys in.
As an Israeli Orthodox Shomer Shabbat Jew, we do Shabbat together, we would live out together because we had the same goal.
Coming into an Orthodox Jewish community as a Christian family is unheard of. Like, that doesn't happen. We actually stayed in their house, this Christian family with 11 children. If I was gonna come up with a business plan and put this all together, there's no way I could have ever even written what's happened here. Even more than neighbors, I would say. Really like family.
You never know when your path might cross with the pages of Scripture. In the case of Hayovel, a radical act of kindness fulfilled a prophecy thousands of years in the making. These Christian farmers moved across the world to be a good neighbor to their Jewish friends. But even still, the closest neighbors can be worlds apart.
When I was 13 years old, I discovered the other side. Strange people who come to control our life without understanding why. We don't understand their language. They teach us how to hate them. You believe that you have no other choice just to face those people and to resist. I create a local military group with other 4 kids. We start our activities by raising the Palestinian flag, which was a crime in that time. We noticed that those soldiers became crazy when they see the flag. So we want to make them crazy. It's kind of a game. At the age of 16, we find some old weapons with 2 grenades and other military materials. 2 of my friends used them against the Israeli soldiers. No one killed, no one injured because they don't know how to use it in a professional way. At the age of 17, we have been arrested. The first one get 21 years in jail, 19, 15, 14, and I get 7 years. In jail, you became a fighter, you became a warrior. It's not a game anymore. So I start to understand my enemy as a tool to defeat him. I watch a movie about the Holocaust in jail. We believe as a Palestinian it's a big lie. I want to enjoy seeing this movie as kind of revenge, to see someone torture those Jewish, kill them. After a few minutes, I found myself crying. We don't believe in it because we don't know anything about it. I say to myself, even if it's a big lie and the Israelis see this movie, they will become crazy. And if it's happened to us, to the Palestinians, maybe we will lose our humanity. Always this movie is in my mind. We became the victim of the victim. We paid the price of a crime that we never know anything about it. We were 120 prisoners in one section from the age of 12 to 19 years old. When I say 12, it's just kids. We hear alarm while we are waiting for our lunch. More than 100 soldiers enter to that section. They take off our clothes and they will beat you from both sides. When it comes to me, I suddenly remember the movie. I get very angry for those people in the movie because they didn't resist. I start to shout. They continue beating me, but I feel strong, and 6 soldiers take me aside and they start to beat me again. And in the middle of that, someone came and lay on me to protect me with his body. This was one of my jailers. He was a very bad man. We discovered that I was a kid, and the occupation created from us fighters or warriors or killers or terrorists, whatever. We became very close friends. Simply, he saved my life, which is very dangerous for him. I start to say to myself, why I need to spend 7 years in the Israeli jails? Why all those people died from both sides? After 100 years of conflict, of killing, of sea of blood, and in one day, suddenly our leaders can sit down and negotiate and can sign peace agreement, I decide I will never use or support armed struggle because it doesn't work. 2005, we create Combatants for Peace. We are not friends, we are not brothers, and this is not our goal to be friends. Our goal is to be partners. We want the same thing, peace and security. Of course, each one from his point of view, but in the end, we are killing each other. We have a very simple message. We have no other place, Israelis and Palestinians. We need to share this land as one state, 2 states, 5 states. Otherwise, we will share the same land as 2 big graves to our kids and our families. In the 16th of January 2007, an Israeli border police shot and killed my 10-year-old daughter Abir in front of her school in East Jerusalem. In her head from the back, she was with her sister and 2 other girls, 9:30 in the morning, after they finished their exam. It's the most painful thing that can happen to anyone. You discover that there is no revenge because you will never meet your daughter again with your pain. It's 24 hours. And you will invite the next victim. We decide in Combatants for Peace to break this circle. I met Robbie and we became very close friends. I think the main message of the ceremony, which is our slogan, is like we share pain and we create future.
Enjoy the ceremony. Thank you.
Memorial Day in Israel is usually just for Jewish people who died in conflict, for soldiers. It's not really for the bereaved parents because I don't need somebody to remind me that I lost a child. Combatants for Peace came up with the idea of having a ceremony which would be for both sides.
For the Israelis, you bring the killers, the terrorists, to our day. And for the Palestinians, we are going to celebrate the killers of our kids.
There's something very moving about this whole ceremony because it encompasses the joint pain.
There is a place for our pain, both of us.
There weren't more than 400 people, 500 people. Today it's become huge.
It's very difficult sometimes to live with your pain alone. Victims can heal victims, like veterans can heal veterans. We discover our humanity from each other.
I don't think there's the situation of black and white here. There's a situation of a huge amount of gray. Don't be involved in the conflict. Be involved in the solution, not the problem. Everybody wants to get up in the morning, go to work, know that their children are safe. Doesn't matter if you're Palestinian, Israeli, or anything else. We have to work together. It's not always easy. Don't make any mistake. We come from totally different environs. Never mind that we're a totally non-homogeneous group. And the thing that binds us all together is this pain. It's the most dignified thing that we can find to do, is to work together.
We kill each other for land. Our life is more holy, more important than any holy land.
We can't afford to give up hope. I live here. Your children aren't standing at roadblocks and dying.
Until now, Israel is not safe, Palestine is not free. We need to change our way, to survive together and to achieve our goal together, to free the Israelis and the Palestinians.
It's important to show another solution to end this violence here. More and more people understand that we have to stop this madness.
In violent conflict like ours, the only winners are the graves. We're supposed to kill each other, and we are working together. as parents.
Who is my neighbor? This question became the catalyst of one of the most famous stories set in Israel, the parable of the Good Samaritan. Christ's timeless story redefines what it means to be a neighbor. In the words of Jesus, a good neighbor is the one who shows mercy and love, a love that goes beyond the barriers of prejudice and social stigma. Will you do the same? Being a good neighbor could turn your past into a pathway to peace and even take you around the world. There is no place love and mercy cannot go, because no matter where we're from, we all need a good neighbor. I leave you with a psalm penned by King David, a blessing over the city, and indeed a prayer for Israel. Pray for the peace of Jerusalem. May they prosper who love you. May peace be within your walls, and prosperity within your palaces. For the sake of my brothers and friends, I will now say, may peace be within you. For the sake of the house of the Lord our God, I will seek your good.